In January of 1840, Charles J. Hill, the future Rochester mayor, took out 2 mortgages to build this house at what is now 97 Tremont Street in Cornhill, known at that time as the 3rd Ward. Ever since the Erie Canal reached Rochesterville in 1823, the village had become a boom town, and there was a great deal of speculation in local real estate. Within a few years, however, Rochester's boom turned into a bust, and Hill was struggling financially, unable to cover a $1,000 balloon payment due on the property. Following foreclosure, the house went up for auction. Several successive owners also suffered misfortunes, suggesting the house may have been jinxed. The first was a real estate agent who purchased the property, also as an investment. A year later, he died of pneumonia. Another owner lost the house when he was arrested for embezzling. In the early 1860s, George C. Buell, who lived nearby in a mansion on the very upscale street known as Livingston Park, bought the Tremont Street home clearly as an investment. Shortly after he acquired the property, his wife died. Buell sold the house to Nelson Lord Button in 1865. It would remain in the Button family for 3 generations, a period of 108 years. However, there was a whiff of witchcraft in the Button family's past, and I suspect one family member may still inhabit the home, upset that her final wish was not granted. In 1628, Nelson's ancestor, Matthias Button, migrated from England to Salem, Massachusetts. Life in the New World proved difficult, as sickness claimed the lives of several children and Button's first 3 wives. The 3rd wife reportedly died of fright and exposure when she fled their home after it had been set on fire by a Matthias enemy. Button took the man to court, accusing him of witchcraft and suing him, quote, "for the burning of my house and my goods that was in it, and the cause of my wife's death," end quote. The jury found in Button's favor and ordered the arsonist to pay him £238 in damages and costs. Skipping ahead a number of generations, Nelson Lloyd Button was born in Massachusetts in 1826. At the age of 16, he became a teacher in a public school, and 4 years later married Jeanette Raymond, one of his students. The couple soon moved to Rochester, New York, and settled in the Tremont house after Nelson became an agent for the American Book Company, a position he would hold for the next 40 years. Button enlarged the family home to 12 rooms, installed lead plumbing, and perhaps haunted by the memory of that earlier ancestor, he introduced improvements designed to protect the family from fire, including a water tank in the attic. The couple had 3 children, but only one survived to adulthood. Perhaps the jinx was still active. Nelson Jr. was born in the house on February 1st, 1873. 20 years later, he married Alice Maud Goodger in the family home, where in 1895, a daughter, Editha Lois Button, was born. 3 generations were now residing in the Button house. Editha would be the only child born to Alice and Nelson. She once described her father as a playboy, a very precious boy, a handsome father brought up to be a gentleman. Grandpa, that would be Nelson Sr., would never let him soil his hands. For many years, the family had a housekeeper, Rosina Hollister, who was so much a part of the family that following her death in 1901, she was interred in the Button family plot at Mount Hope Cemetery. Because of Rosina, Editha never had to do any chores. She said, "I'm not at all domestic. My mother used to see to it that I was always taken care of." Editha was both pampered and, as we shall see, quite willful. The family also owned a summer house on a farm on East River Road. It included horses, pigs, cats, and dogs. As a child, Editha developed such affection for these animals that she became a vegetarian. "I could never eat my playmates," she said. She and her mother became fervent anti-vivisectionists and started an organization called the Humanitarian League Society to promote that cause. It was incorporated in the Tremont Street address, where meetings took place for more than 4 decades. When Editha was 16, she eloped with a 21-year-old Ferdinand Joseph Reynolds. As soon as her parents learned of it, they had the marriage annulled. Despite that, Editha convinced them to give Reynolds a bedroom in the family home. Years later, in 1951, the couple married again. But 13 years after their marriage, December of 1964, Reynolds died at St. Mary's Hospital from a cerebral hemorrhage. And now, a century after her grandparents had first moved into the Tremont Street house, Editha Button, last of the line, was alone in the big home with 3 toy poodles for company. The neighborhood was in decline, and urban renewal began tearing down many of its historic homes. She refused to move, insisting there was a feeling you get from living in the 3rd Ward. By 1970, things were improving. "I stuck it out in the neighborhood," she said, "when everyone else. And now all young people are moving back in and making it fashionable to live here again." On March 30th, 1973, Editha Lois Button died in the same bedroom where she had been born more than 78 years earlier. In her final years, she could not imagine that anyone could possibly appreciate the house as much as the Buttons did. She declared in her will that it was to be completely demolished after her death. A nephew began getting quotes from contractors to tear down the now empty house. But the Landmark Society of Western New York filed an application to proclaim the house a landmark, which stopped any attempt at demolition. A few days later, a caretaker stopped by to check on the house and happened upon a fire that had broken out in Editha's bedroom. The water tank in the attic was no longer functional, but the fire was contained without it. According to a more recent owner, the floor in that bedroom is still charred around the spot where Editha's bed once stood. Today, the house is an Airbnb, and I would like to check into that room just to confirm if the floor is indeed charred. But even if it's not, there are stories that the rooms exude a strange presence. And I would just love spending an evening with that fascinatingly complex and mysterious woman. Wouldn't you?